What are your thoughts to Alabama losing against a non-ranked team? And then obviously the next week, Iowa, Penn State. I mean, all these teams that a lot of people thought were going to make it to the four-team playoff are falling out right now. What are your thoughts to Alabama losing, and do you think Alabama still has a chance to get into that playoff?
I'll answer your second question first. Yes, they still have a chance to get in, mainly because I do think that the committee will see what I think a lot of us saw. This was Texas A&M in a good spot at home, 106,000 in College Station. I don't think that Texas A&M can win that football game on a neutral site, and I don't think at all they can win that game in Tuscaloosa. Nick Saban's teams have always been really weird like this. He has had two perfect season teams. The first one was that first-year team with Greg McElroy. I think Mark Ingram was on that squad, and Rolando McClain on the defense. And then last year, which last year was such an aberration because 20% capacity and all that, most of his teams are one-loss teams, and then they lose games like that one. On the road, in a weird spot, a team gets up, and then they get punched in the face, Bama does, and then they go from there and they go on. And a one-loss Bama team, I've always said the most dangerous things in this world, the boogeyman and the one-loss Alabama team, because of the fact that at that point now, Nick Saban's messages land. Because it's like, hey, after your first loss, now we can't lose any more, boys. And then the talent takes over. So I do think they can still get in because of resume. And then, like you said, Iowa falls. Who knows with Cincinnati? They could fall. Ohio State's already fallen to an Oregon team. How good is that Oregon team? Who knows? So it's one of those situations where I think Bama now knows that moving forward, okay, we have now beat one of the teams that beat Texas A&M, and we just drilled them in Mississippi State at home last weekend. Now, if they can go on and continue to run the table, that's the reason why I think the committee will put them in. There's too many non-Power 5 teams that are too far down on the ranking, and I don't think their strength of schedule will get them up there enough to make it happen. So, yeah, the loss on paper is a terrible one, but I think in 3 weeks from now, we'll be like, okay, that Texas A&M game was what it was. It was a loss on the road in a really tough spot, but it's not really an indictment on Alabama. I've said this about Bama. I've heard this said as well. Everybody is being compared to Alabama, and Alabama is being compared to perfection. And so there's just two different scales going on here, and I think the committee will see that.
Before I ask the question, we do have Jeff on.
What's going on, Jeff?
Gerard, buddy, don't go wasting your money on that bet, friend.
I said that I could be.
And I hate to break your heart, Gerard.
What's up?
But Alabama's not going to be a one-loss team, friend. They're going to be a two-loss team when Georgia stuffs them in a locker in the SEC championship game. There's zero chance you're getting into the college football playoff. Zero.
I do remember our conversation last time. You did speak highly of Georgia, and I think the same thing. To me, the thing is that game in and of itself, I think Georgia will enter that game undefeated. Bama will enter with a loss. And those two teams, I do think that if you just compare the matchups, I do think that Georgia's defense is the best unit on the field. Of Alabama offense, Alabama defense, Georgia offense, Georgia defense. Georgia defense is the best unit on the field. Now, can the Alabama offense score just enough to outscore the Georgia offense to what they do against Alabama? That's what I think can happen. I think that you're thinking that it can't happen. I understand that part of the argument. I just don't think that it will in Atlanta. I've just seen Georgia choke too many times. I've seen it all. Okay, so being in Alabama, and we are 30 minutes down the road from the state line. I've seen way too much heartbreak from teams from that state until I got to see it before I believe it. But I get your point, because through 6 games they look unbeatable.
All right, so in terms of that game, going back to the Texas A&M loss, what do you think could be the biggest thing exposed about Alabama? Say if they do make the playoffs, let's say they do beat Georgia and they make it as the 3 or the 4 seed. What do you think maybe another team could expose, a better team, even Georgia or even one of the Big Ten teams that could get in? What do you think is the biggest flaw?
I think Jeff hit on it. I think Georgia is that kind of team that has the elements of what could beat this Alabama football team. Now, if they can do it consistently for 4 quarters, that remains to be seen. I think the elements that beat this Alabama football team are teams that can turn them over. I think Georgia can, but I think Bama at this point will play a safe enough game in order to keep them from turning it over. Now, it's one of those things where I think that Bama, the way that Bama plays defense, it's really kind of all hit or miss. Their pass rush is good, but it's not great. It's led by two players. It's led by Henry Toto, and Will Anderson. And they're the best two pass rushers two of the best. Will Anderson probably is the best right now after what he did last week. But I think that if you can get this Bama team to turn the ball over, then you have a shot because a team like Georgia can capitalize on that. I don't think a team like you saw what happened in the Ole Miss game. You get too aggressive and then Bama capitalizes on your mistakes. I think a similar thing will happen in the Iron Bowl when they play Auburn in a few weeks. There's very few ways to crack open this football team. Now, if your quarterback can run it effectively, Nick Saban's defenses have always had problems with that, and I think you'll have an issue with that there. I don't believe that in JT Daniels, and I don't believe that in Stinson, the backup quarterback for Georgia. Now the starter. So that's to me. You have to kind of come in with that really, really solid team. Quarterback is a true running threat, and then you have a shot against this team once you take away a couple of possessions via turnover.
Jeff, you have a question?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I love Garrard's take on Alabama football. I think he's a reasonable Alabama football fan. But if we're being honest about this, right, they lose to Georgia, they go to 2 losses. Because I heard you say, Ohio State has a 1 loss. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, look at whose loss is better and whose loss is worse. You lost to an unranked Texas A&M team. At least when Ohio State lost, Oregon was 3rd ranked, and they're still going to be ranked. There's no way Texas A&M is going to finish the team ranked. So when you end up with 2 losses, and you had a terrible loss to Texas A&M, Cincinnati's going to go undefeated, Ohio State's only going to have 1 loss. How are you getting into the college football playoff when your team is dog shit?
You're projecting a lot because I don't know if Cincinnati goes undefeated. SMU's still out there for them. I don't know if Ohio State goes undefeated. Michigan is still out there. I mean, there is an ebb and flow with all these college football seasons. I do think that of all of the Bama teams, if you're just ranking Alabama teams, this is not the best Alabama football team. I do think Georgia runs away with the East, runs away with it, and they do meet them in Atlanta. And this might just be a situation where it comes down to 4 quarters in Atlanta for that championship game. And if that's the case, then in the same way I would probably put my money on you in this UFC fight, I would probably put my money on Alabama. In Atlanta, just because I've seen it so freaking many times, and I know it's not a great analysis, but I just have.
You should be putting your money on me, Garrard.
But until I've seen it, and I know it's a terrible take, but as soon as I have to see it with Kirby Smart against Nick Saban, and if let's just say Georgia had a Justin Fields type quarterback, I'd feel a little bit better about Georgia, but they don't. And to me, those are the teams that kill Alabama. And of course, Texas A&M doesn't have that at all. This is not a Johnny Manziel, Cam Newton kind of guy. This is a one-off situation with that football team. But I do think you're projecting a lot because I don't know. Ohio State to me is probably the scariest one-loss team out there right now. And I think that Alabama might be the best one-loss team right now. And we'll see what happens in Atlanta between those 2 squads.
Listen, you think I'm projecting, okay, which is fair. Whose loss is worse? Alabama's or Ohio State's? You can just say it's Alabama's, but it'd be good to hear the words come out of your mouth.
Oh, yeah. Hey, listen, Jeff, I grew up with Auburn fans. These words pain me to say. But no, Alabama's loss is much worse. I mean, I'm not talking about like a little bit worse. It is many degrees worse, especially if Oregon continues to win. Now, they can't have another game like they had against Stanford a couple of weeks ago. But if Oregon continues to win, which I think they will, and Mario Cristobal I think is a really good head coach over there, and Ohio State continues to win, which I think that they will, I think the Michigan game got a lot tastier now than it maybe was at the beginning of the season. Then we have a situation where we will talk about a one-loss one-loss Bama, a one-loss Ohio State, and you just take those 2 1-losses. I think the committee will take more sort of the wins than the loss, but if you compare 2 Power 5 teams that have 1 loss, you just look at the loss, and it's hands down Bama's loss is worse.
So Carl Gerard is asking me a question. Question becomes, does Georgia get in if they lose the SEC championship against Bama?
Yup.
I think that they do, but they need help. They need Ohio State to lose another one, and they need Cincinnati to lose to SMU.
You think that they do?
I do, because if Oklahoma runs the table and stays undefeated, you have Oklahoma as the Big 12 champion, undefeated. You'll have Alabama as a one-loss SEC champion, and then you'll have whoever the Big Ten champion is. Let's just say Michigan runs the table and wins it, and or Ohio State wins that championship. You'll have that Ohio State team in. Now it's who deserves that fourth spot the most. Then it's a one-loss the Cincinnati team that's a conference champion, or it's a one-loss Georgia team who plays in the SEC East, which, given their topsy-turvy nature, that's where I think the committee's going to have to make a decision. And I won't be a bit surprised if the committee's really split on that. Who's better than the two? I think Georgia's got a better roster, and the committee will acknowledge that. The rosters for Georgia is better than the roster for Cincinnati.
I think you're giving the committee too much credit, Gerard.
Well, I've seen them on multiple occasions do some things that I think is like it's a little head scratching. But the thing is that do you put one-loss Georgia, one-loss Bama in there with whether it's your Big Ten champion Ohio State and or Michigan, and then let's just say Michigan runs the table, and let's just say they're in the same situation Georgia's in, where they have the one loss. They don't play a good schedule. So do you have the Michigan team that's one loss and a conference champion, or a one loss and a conference runner-up, or Ohio State that's a one loss and a conference champion? Then you compare the schedules, and that's where I think Georgia's schedule doesn't necessarily match up. Clemson did them no favors. Has done them no favors, looking like trash.
But I think that you're forgetting something, Gerard.
What's that?
I honestly think that you're overlooking the fact that, okay, people will vote in Oklahoma over Cincinnati, right? Like that will happen. But because the committee is made up of deans and chancellors and athletic directors of all these other different schools, they're going to take a one-loss Georgia over an undefeated Oklahoma just because they want to punish Oklahoma for leaving to go to the SEC. There's going to be a punishment there, and this could be it.
That runs into the politics of it, though, and I don't think for a second that the committee doesn't play a lot of these politics in it, and that's honestly that's a factor, Jeff. I never even thought about because to us that cover we're in SEC country, cover a lot of SEC football. We keep putting that date a lot more in the future than probably is realistic than what's actually going to happen. It would be interesting to see if the committee shuns Oklahoma over a Georgia football team. But listen, I think Georgia, through 6 games, to me, there is no 7 games. There's no better team right now, playing football right now, than Georgia. Georgia can only hurt its case, not help its case. And so if its case is only hurt by a one loss in the championship game, then I
Say
think...
it again, Gerard. Say it louder for the people in the back. There's no one playing better football than who?
Than Georgia. Oh, the Georgia Bulldogs are playing the best football, and it's not even close right now. It's not even close right now.
They have all 63 first-place votes.
Correct. Exactly. And the A people, and I mean, as of right now, I mean, I could see some member of the media just trying to think outside the box, or just trying to be different and throwing in a Cincinnati out there, throwing in Oklahoma out there. But the question is, when they get into that room, does a one-loss Georgia team who didn't win a conference championship in the weaker division better than Oklahoma? Yes, it is. I don't know if I could trust that 15, 20, whatever that number is on the committee to do so and put them in that right spot. I could be wrong. I think that if I was voting, Georgia would be that 4th spot, but I'm not sure.